It's a cold afternoon further south, especially where any of that persistent fog remains. Temperatures struggling out of the low single figures where that happens. And the fog quickly reforming overnight, with eastern England signalled as being the, well, favoured spot, I should say, for some of the worst visibility by the start of the weekend. Low cloud more likely for South Wales, southwest England. Perhaps frost-free here, in between some sunshine, but certainly a cold start once again across a large part of England and Wales. Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing a bit more of a breeze and areas of cloud, so generally fog and frost-free here, but a lot of cloud and some showery rain into the northwest later. Whilst England and Wales stay generally quite gloomy, some brighter spells, but in a few spots, particularly eastern England, the mist and fog could last all day. And again, where that happens, it will feel on the chilly side. Sunday brings brighter skies to northern parts of the UK, staying generally cloudy and misty further south. Monday sees mixed conditions for many, but for most, it's looking rather dry.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Australian Prime Minister has defended his government's decision to cancel Novak Djokovic's visa, saying it was in the public interest. The tennis star had previously won his court appeal against being denied entry to the country, but the Australian government said it would continue to explore ways to deport him. It puts further doubt over the unvaccinated world number one's participation in the Australian Open, which starts on Monday. The Prime Minister's former Director of Communications has apologised unreservedly for a party held to mark his leaving Downing Street. Number 10 staff have been accused of holding two parties the day before the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. Restrictions at the time banned indoor mixing between different households. Downing Street says Boris Johnson wasn't at either gathering and was away from home at the time. But Shadow Attorney General for England and Wales, Emily Thornberry, told GB News the Prime Minister should have enforced restrictions.
The rules apply to everybody equally. That's what the rule of law is about. It isn't just rules for some people and the leadership don't need to worry about it. It applies to everyone. No one is so grand, Boris Johnson, that the rules don't apply to them. and he should not have been having parties at Number 10, and the staff at Number 10 should not have thought that it was okay to have parties even when he wasn't there. They wouldn't have had a party if they thought that Boris Johnson didn't approve of it.
A parliamentary committee has said public money should be withheld from cricket unless it can clean up its act on racism. It's after Azim Rafiq gave an emotional testimony in November last year after racism he experienced at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. Yorkshire have been widely criticised for their handling of Rafiq's allegations. Virginia Giuffre says she's pleased a judge has ruled her civil sex abuse case against the Duke of York can go ahead. Ms Giuffre says she wants to expose the truth. Prince Andrew denies all of the allegations against him. It's after the Duke was stripped of his royal patronages and military titles. Royal commentator Dickie Arbiter says Andrew's legal team now have some difficult decisions to make.
He's had his comeuppance. He's going to have to now fight this case. He's got several options: fight the case, pay off. But paying off comes at a price, not only the value, but also an apology. An apology then is seen by many as an admission of guilt. He's in a no-win situation, and being in a no-win situation, there's no way back for him.
The Foreign Office has raised concerns with the Chinese ambassador after MI5 warned an agent has been interfering in UK politics. China has denied the allegations, saying it has no need to buy influence in any foreign parliament. Security Minister Damien Hines told GB News MI5 issued the alert to put a stop to spies' activities.
This is an example of our system working, having detected it and then using this notice to disrupt it and to warn effectively other people. So, as I say, you know, it's the system at work, and these notices are one tool that the security service has at its disposal. But what we've seen yesterday is a disruption of this activity. I'm afraid that we're likely to see more of these in the future.
25 charities have written to the Prime Minister calling for urgent action to tackle the energy bill crisis. Charities including Save the Children and Age UK warn emergency funding is needed. The warning comes as fuel poverty could increase from 4 to 6 million households. Members of Insulate Britain have been released from prison this morning after they broke an injunction preventing them from protesting on roads. They're among 10 people who were jailed for breaking the government's injunction on the M25. Members of the activist group took part in a series of protests that staged blockades on major roads between September and November of last year. The UK's economy returned to above pre-pandemic levels in November. That's before the Omicron variant hit. Official figures show GDP rose by 0.9%, more than 0.5% higher than predicted. The construction sector saw some of the greatest growth thanks to dry weather. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, but now it's over to Patrick and Anaya and to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Iman, and Patrick Christys on your TV and on your radio. We've got a show full of all of today's big discussions and big stories that you care about, so here's what's on the menu.
Yes, well, it really is a bumper news day today, ladies and gentlemen. Prince Andrew has had his honorary military roles and royal patronages taken away by the Queen. He will also no longer use the style of His Royal Highness in any official capacity. So this morning, spare a thought for Her Majesty. That's what I'm saying. Let's spare a thought for the Queen,
yes,
who's also found out that there was yet another Downing Street party the night before she had to sit alone at her husband's funeral.
Yes, and we're asking about the booze culture in Westminster after it emerged there may have been more parties while the Queen was forced to grieve alone at Prince Philip's funeral.
And has Westminster actually also been infiltrated by a Chinese spy? A Labour MP stands accused anyway of taking potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds from a Chinese operative. We're live with Priti Patel in the Commons at 11.
Indeed, well, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme, so make sure, as usual, you get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on the Queen.
Prince Andrew has been cast out by his family, humiliated, isolated and potentially now relatively skint. He wakes up this morning as a shadow of his former self. But whilst most of the media are focusing their attentions now on the Duke of York, I thought I'd turn my attention to the Queen instead. No mother would ever wish to take this kind of action against her son. Our Queen has stripped him of basically all of his military titles and patronages, etc., etc. And in case you're wondering, that's actually quite a lot. I believe we can take a look at some of these now, just if we wheel them out and whiz them through on the screen, potentially. There we go. There's a lot of them, supposed to be anyway, but there we are. These include things like Admiral of the Sea Cadet Corps, Colonel of the Grenadier Guards, titles from Canada, from New Zealand, and you can see all these patronages as well, of course. Royal Ascot Golf Club, I imagine that he'll be pretty annoyed at that one. There's the Royal Thames Yacht Club. I mean, there's loads of others there you can see on your screen. I mean, there's far too many, actually, for us to just wheel out non-stop. But, of course, the allegations against Andrew, which he categorically and wholeheartedly denies, are sleazy, grotty, low-rent, classless and degrading. Everything that our Queen is not. According to reports, Andrew's cornerstone is now his lawyer. And I think, as a rule, when you're that close to your lawyer, something has gone horribly wrong, hasn't it? The Queen has been fundamentally let down by Andrew, even though he denies these allegations and may well, of course, be found not guilty. The whole process has been utterly humiliating. Not least the whole Pizza Express invoking stuff and then, as well, you know, the sweat. But he's not the only one who's let her down recently. Harry and Meghan chucked a pulled grenade into Buckingham Palace when they found freedom in Oprah's bosom, dishing out a catalogue of demonstrable lies and even the allegation of there being an unnamed royal racist. But it's not just her family who've let her down recently, is it? As her husband lay in a coffin, the Queen was forced to sit alone with a mask on, self-isolating in a way from the rest of her family on what must have been one of the very saddest days of her life. Her beloved Philip, as she called him, had passed away and she was left to front up to it alone as a result of the COVID guidelines. All the while, Downing Street staff, quite possibly even our Prime Minister, were maskless, glugging wine and scoffing cheese. This government has let her down as well. As she approaches her Platinum Jubilee mired in this scandal, controversy and sleaze of the past 18 months, I think it's worth noting, has she ever really let us down? At the tender age of just 13, she remained in Buckingham Palace after it was bombed in a show of solidarity with the rest of the country. She joined the Women's Auxiliary Territory Service, not particularly easy for me to say, as a mechanic. This was no mean feat, as 335 members of the ATS were actually killed during the war. She presided over the scaling back of the British Empire, which, at its height, held 57 colonies and other territories, comprising about a quarter of the world's landmass. And then she also presided over the building up of the Commonwealth. When she was crowned, the Commonwealth had 8 member states. Today, there are 54. She's devoted much of her life to her tireless charity work. She's lived through the Troubles, went on that historic trip to Northern Ireland in 2011. She's seen 14 prime ministers come and go. She's our longest reigning monarch and one of the longest in history as well. And we have been blessed to have her. Our Queen has been badly let down recently by members of her own family and by this government. She has always been there for us, though, the people, when we've needed her. But perhaps now she needs us. She must be concerned about the impact all of this is having on the reputation of the royal family. As she enters her dotage, she must be concerned as well about what she's leaving behind, the future of the British monarchy. As we prepare for a Platinum Jubilee on February the 6th, I think it's important that we do our bit to show her that this country and its people still want and need a royal family, and that in times of crisis, it is our enduring love for her that will ensure that it survives. Yes, I just feel so sorry for the Queen in all of this. You know, it's been an absolutely terrible 18 months, to say the very least. And I think let down by the ones closest to her as well, really.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest here, I'm not necessarily a monarchist. I'm quite ambivalent to the monarchy. I think, you know, I can see some of the benefits, but I'm not, you know, a raging monarchist or anything. But one thing I will say is that the Queen's behaviour has been absolutely impeccable. And as she enters, you know, very senior years of her life, I completely agree with you that it must be very disheartening to find out that she has embodied some of the highest values that we have in this country: continuity, duty, tradition, and embodied it incredibly beautifully. And all of the things that are now challenging the monarchy are not coming from her, it's coming from other people. And I think that is indeed very sad. I think that is very sad.
No, I agree. And I think as well, this particular period of her life, let's be honest, one would imagine, like anyone would, you come towards the end of your career, or whatever you want to call it as, of course, your service in her case, and you would hope that you'd left the situation a better one than you'd found it. You'd hope that maybe you could have a period of time relaxing a little bit, certainly mentally anyway, relaxing a little bit, knowing that the path that's going to follow you is going to be in good hands. And she simply can't do that.
Well, what I would say is that, the monarchy has survived in this country for so long that it has endured, I'm sure, much worse than this. And I suspect it will survive, because even in all of this horrendous incidents that have been happening, we have not seen a huge groundswell of emotion in order to abolish the monarchy or anything like that. One thing that is quite interesting, though, is looking at some polls, and there is quite a significant generational divide here. So actually, a lot of the polls of people under the age of 30, it seems in some polls, actually, the majority do not support the continuation of the monarchy. So I think that's something we need to be looking at.
I agree, and I agree to the point where I'm just deciding live on air, much to the screams of the people that I'm going to be hearing in the gallery now, that I think maybe we should do a poll on this. Well, do you think that the royal family will survive? Do you think the monarchy will survive in the future? Don't worry, we'll go to a break. We'll get that all sorted for you. But anyway, let's cross live now to Windsor and talk to GB News' very own reporter, Ellie Costello. Thank you very much, Ellie. What's the latest for us then, please?
Well, good morning, Patrick and Anaya. And Prince Andrew was pictured leaving Windsor Castle yesterday after what I imagine were very difficult conversations with his mother, the Queen, inside the castle. And it's not quite clear who that ultimate decision came from, whether it was Prince Andrew, whether it was his brother, Prince Charles, or whether it was indeed his mother, the Queen, who decided that his royal career should essentially be extinguished. But shortly after that conversation, we had a rare statement from Buckingham Palace, and in it said that Prince Andrew will be losing his royal and military titles. He will no longer be partaking in any royal duties. They will be given to other members of the royal family. He will no longer use the title His Royal Highness in an official setting anyway, and he will defend this civil case in New York as a private citizen, and that comes after the green light on Wednesday by Judge Kaplan in New York for this civil case against Prince Andrew to go ahead. And of course, Prince Andrew denies any wrongdoing. He always has done. But that was the catalyst behind this statement from Buckingham Palace, and also the catalyst behind this open letter that we saw yesterday from 150 military veterans from across our armed forces. And a direct quote from that letter said they were writing to the Queen with anger and upset. They wanted Prince Andrew to be removed from his honorary military roles. And it started with a no comment from the palace after that open letter yesterday, but by yesterday evening it became very apparent that Prince Andrew could not continue in these positions. So what does that mean practically? Well, there will be no more appearances on Buckingham Palace balcony by Prince Andrew. There'll be no more riding horseback during trooping of the colour, and indeed it is the Queen's Platinum Jubilee year. We will not see Prince Andrew at any official events, and there will also be no laying of the wreath at Remembrance Sunday at the Cenotaph. Some say this is overdue, some say that the process had to go on, and this has probably been discussed for a very long time in the British royal family if this civil case did get the go-ahead, which indeed it has. And Prince Andrew has stepped down from public life since 2019 after that pretty awful BBC Newsnight interview. I think we can all agree he's very much lived in the shadows, spending a lot of time in Windsor Castle. But I think it's clear from the palace that their priority now is to protect the Windsor name, protect the Windsor brand, and ultimately protect our Queen in her Jubilee year, a 95-year-old woman, our head of state, and she needs now to be at peace and to get on with her job.
Well, thank you, Ellie. That was Ellie Costello, our GB News reporter, giving us the latest on the Prince Andrew scandal going on at the moment. Well, joining us now is royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliam. Thank you for joining us, Richard. I mean, what is your take on what is going on right now with Prince Andrew?
Well, I think what happened yesterday was absolutely inevitable. As soon as Judge Lewis Kaplan in New York made it clear that the case brought against him, which he vehemently denies all the allegations by Virginia Roberts Giuffre, was going ahead, I mean, his position basically had become untenable. This had happened and been happening over a long period of time. He lost all public support after that absolutely bizarre interview on Newsnight with Emily Maitlis. But there were other issues too. The fact he was haunted by a photograph of him with Virginia Roberts, as she was then, and the now convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. The fact that there was a drip of publicity, not only undesirable friends, but also attempts, for example, his legal team tried to get this case thrown out on technicalities. What we were seeing...
Just on that, Richard, sorry to interrupt, but just on that, you just got to a great point there, because apparently when Andrew went to meet with the Queen, he brought his lawyer with him, and his lawyer ended up sitting in the car for a while.
Well, but his lawyer couldn't possibly be expected to see the Queen. I mean, that was absurd.
But what does that imply about the nature of the meeting that Andrew had with our Queen? And what can you tell us about the conversations that she may have had with Prince Charles and Prince William as well? Because the reports today are that they are absolutely furious.
Well, there's absolutely no doubt that this has been coming. It has been inevitable for a long time. Obviously, Prince Charles and Prince William have been concerned for a very considerable period of time over Prince Andrew's activities, the way he was handling things, and quite frankly, I mean, this was, as I say, it was inevitable. But equally, so far as his legal advice is concerned, I think that he believed that this civil suit could be stopped. When it was abundantly clear that it couldn't be, it still leaves three options. First option is that he ignores it, in which case there'd be a default judgment almost certainly against him. Second option, that he settles, but as we've seen with tweets today, I mean, we don't know what Virginia Roberts Giuffre would accept. It's not just, it seems, a matter of money. We conceivably will have to see 95% of such cases do get settled. And thirdly, can you just imagine what would happen if the discovery process followed by court appearance took place? I mean, this would be, and still would be, a form of cause célèbre. What was done by the Queen, and also with the agreement of Prince Charles and Prince William, was to protect the monarchy, and it's very significant in a year where the Queen uniquely, and you were saying this earlier, the service she's given us, commemorating, and we will be celebrating 70 years. It's truly remarkable, unique in our history. For this to be overshadowed by Andrew and his although he strongly denies it, the facts are that he's a very controversial figure, would be appalling.
Absolutely. Richard, look, thank you very much. Expertly done, as always. I'm sure we're speaking to you again very soon. Royal commentator there, Richard Fitzwilliams. Later in the show, we're revisiting this, and we're going to have a chat a bit about how's Andrew actually going to pay for this. Like a lot of members of the royal family, asset-rich, not going to say cash-poor, but certainly not as cash-rich as one may expect he might have to be if he does decide to settle. So we'll be getting stuck into all of that.
Yes, well, after the break, we'll be talking about the work culture in Westminster. How often do work events turn into parties? We'll be speaking to a former special advisor about this.
Hello, good morning. It's pretty cold out there for many of us, a frosty start with some dense fog patches to contend with during the morning and in some places into the early afternoon. Otherwise, sunny spells away from the fog, the weather staying generally dry and settled under this area of high pressure, but it's the light winds surrounding this high pressure that have led to the frost and fog overnight. And that means it's going to stay chilly for some time this morning. Temperatures only slowly rising, the fog only slowly thinning and lifting. Some fog patches lasting into the afternoon, but otherwise across a good part of England and Wales, sunny spells replace the fog. Less fog and frost for Scotland and Northern Ireland, more cloud here, some persistent damp weather for the far north and northwest, but milder for the northwest of Scotland, 10 Celsius here, whilst it's a cold afternoon further south, especially where any of that persistent fog remains. Temperatures struggling out of the low single figures where that happens. And the fog quickly reforming overnight, with eastern England signalled as being the, well, favoured spot, I should say, for some of the worst visibility by the start of the weekend. Low cloud more likely for South Wales, southwest England. Perhaps frost-free here, in between some sunshine, but certainly a cold start once again across a large part of England and Wales. Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing a bit more of a breeze and areas of cloud, so generally fog and frost-free here, but a lot of cloud and some showery rain into the northwest later. Whilst England and Wales stay generally quite gloomy, some brighter spells, but in a few spots, particularly eastern England, the mist and fog could last all day. And again, where that happens, it will feel on the chilly side. Sunday brings brighter skies to northern parts of the UK, staying generally cloudy and misty further south. Monday sees mixed conditions for many, but for most, it's looking rather dry.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Very good morning, everyone, and happy Friday to you. It's 10:24 in the morning, and this is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Anaya Phillip Ingram, right here on GB News. We're live on your telly and on your radio.
Yeah, so we've been talking about this all week. Partygate, the latest. Downing Street staff have been accused of holding 2 more leaving parties in number 10, one on the night before the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. And a report by The Telegraph says the gatherings made up of about 30 people drinking alcohol and dancing to music until the early hours of the morning.
Yes, well, we're just going to quickly cross now to Tom Harwood, who's at Downing Street for us. He's our political correspondent, of course he is. And we want to get the kind of factual latest on that. And then we're going to go to a guest after that to explain in depth the booze culture around Westminster, because that's really what this seems like. And of course, Tom Harwood would know nothing about the booze culture in Westminster, so there's no point asking him about it. Tom, what's the very latest?
Might be more accurate to say I remember nothing of the booze culture in Westminster. It's just that boozy. No, this is a new story that appeared in The Telegraph late last night about what happened in April 2021. In fact, what happened the night before the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. So really quite a stark contrast there. We all remember that picture of the Queen sitting alone at the funeral, not being able to be consoled by members of her family, a limit of 30 going to that funeral. Well, the night before, there were 2 parties within the complex behind me. Now, people often forget, because number 10 looks like it's just one small little house. It's actually a sprawling complex that has over 100 offices and spreads out quite a way through. The whole thing is knocked through. So there were 2 separate leaving parties on that Friday night. One for James Slack, who was the Director of Communications for Boris Johnson, and one for a number 10 photographer as well. What then happened was those parties are alleged to have merged, to have gone together in the garden. After one report suggested that one of those parties was holding an almost nightclub-like scene in the basement of number 10, with a staffer acting as a DJ and music leading to dancing, worries about wine being spilled. So that group went into the garden, found this other party, and they drank late into the early hours of the morning. So much so that it's alleged that one of the children's swings in the garden of number 10 was broken by a drunken partygoer. That is the scale of party that we're talking about, although an important caveat here: that night, that Friday night, Boris Johnson was not here in Downing Street. He was at Chequers, where he often goes on a weekend. So this was something that the staff did unto themselves.
Well, thank you, Tom Howard, for bringing us the latest on all of these scandals still emerging from number 10. Political correspondent Tom Howard. I mean, I think this is obviously, you know, an ongoing conversation, but I'm actually worried about the kind of security element here. Just the constant leaking going on. It must be a toxic, horrible environment right now in number 10 of just fears that every single thing that's going to be said is going to be leaked to the press. Not a very good working environment at all, in my view.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by Oscar Reddrop, who's a former special advisor in Westminster, now, of course, at Hawthorne Advisors. Welcome, Oscar. Thanks for joining us. Look, we do try to take a bit of a different angle on these stories. You know, yesterday we kind of had a look at the police and why they didn't clamp down on these things. And today, really, I just want to talk about the actual booze culture around Westminster, because, especially around Downing Street, because there obviously is one. And do you think that's blurred the lines here between essentially work and parties?
Well, there absolutely is and was one. And I think the distinction we have to make here is the booze culture, if you want to call it that, around Westminster pre-COVID, obviously means something very different. And at that point, before rules, regulations, and we were dealing with this pandemic, you know, a lot of the MPs I spoke to and worked for, a lot of their deals, if you will, in terms of, you know, I've got a local constituency issue, I need to get some funding for a local school or a park, whatever it may be. Actually, popping over down to a pub in Westminster and having a pint with the minister, the relevant minister, would often be the thing that got things done in their local community. So actually, we have this. I think sometimes we do like to self-destruct a little bit as a country, and actually we do down the booze culture and we attach all these negative connotations to it. Pre-COVID was actually, I think, probably quite a nice thing about our politics. Yeah. There's a nice way you can look at it. Obviously, the latest revelations that we've seen this morning about the latest party scandal, again, is so toxically unhelpful for people's faith in politics. And I have to say, even the language, so just a basic communications level, the language of, oh, it was a farewell speech, you know, like, the word farewell, and the people who are in charge of explaining these parties or defending them now should know that farewell is a connotation very much met with people having to say goodbye or not being able to say farewell to their loved ones because they were following regulations. So there's just real communications mistakes being made here.
But also, I mean, a counterpoint to that would be, I mean, sometimes when people think of the guys in the city, you know, it's incredibly high pressure, high intensity job, and actually the alcohol culture around it is some of the ways in which people relieve pressure. Yeah. And you may well say that, I mean, pre-COVID, but even during COVID, that was potentially the most high-pressure environment that Number 10 ever experienced when they're dealing with decisions that had transformational impacts on people's lives. And a bit of a drink could actually just be the relaxation that some people might need in order to just get their head right.
And look, and I know some people won't want to hear this, and I know they won't, because and it's a horrible political word again, but the optics are so lousy.
Relevant when it comes to booze, though.
Very true, and so shoddy. But there were big things going on at the time, and there were big decisions that the government were actually getting right at that moment in time. You know, the preparation for a world-leading vaccine programme. And I am aware that we really, as a country, sometimes like to talk ourselves down, and I'm not excusing behaviour, but very important and very, very good things for this country were being worked on at that time.
I mean, obviously, you know, that this was May 2020, some of these allegations, and so perhaps nobody would have anticipated that it was going to be exposed a year and a half down the line. I mean, some of the things that I mentioned, I mean, do you think that this leaking environment is also creating quite a toxic environment at the moment? Because I must think that actually people might not even feel like they're able to communicate right now out of fear.
Completely. I can't imagine what it's like to be working there in that place right now. I would decided to broaden it out a bit. I would actually, we were just talking off air. This is actually, and again, people might not want to hear this, but this is actually quite helpful for Boris. The partying and boozing culture was so zoomed in, and as we know, on Boris Johnson over the last few days. The fact that he was at Chequers, in a way, the more general and kind of constant this becomes, oddly, I think the more helpful this is for Boris.
It adds to the notion that he could have just wandered in. He could have just wandered into a party. You know, he could have done. And I do think, look, I said it before, I said it again, I know we chatted a little bit off air, which is that if you are someone who doesn't particularly want any more coronavirus regulations going forward, if you are someone who doesn't particularly want another general election, doesn't want someone who's, even though Boris hasn't potentially been the most conservative prime ministers, of course, if you want someone who's at least potentially actively a bit of a conservative, you shouldn't necessarily really want him to go anywhere, really. But we have to.
That's debatable, I think.
Well, we'll see.
That's debatable.
We can get in touch about it. GBNews, GBNews.uk. Oscar, talk to you all day, my good man, but we've got to let you go, I'm afraid. See you at the pub later, probably. Oscar Redrop there, former special advisor in Westminster, now at Hawthorne Advisors as well.
Yes, well, coming up, we'll take a look at we'll look at how the hell it's been possible for the Chinese spy to infiltrate Parliament. But before that, a look at the morning's news.
It's 10:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Australian Prime Minister has defended his government's decision to cancel Novak Djokovic's visa, saying it was in the public interest. The tennis star previously won his court appeal against being deported. It's put further doubt over whether or not the unvaccinated world number one will play in the Australian Open. The first Grand Slam of the year starts on Monday. The Prime Minister's former Director of Communications has apologised unreservedly for a party held to mark his leaving Downing Street. Number 10 staff have been accused of holding two parties on the eve of the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. Downing Street says Boris Johnson wasn't at either gathering and was away from home at the time. Virginia Giuffre says that she's pleased a judge has ruled her civil sex abuse case against the Duke of York can go ahead. Ms Giuffre says she wants to expose the truth. Prince Andrew denies all of the allegations against him. It's after the Duke was stripped of his royal patronages and military titles. The UK's economy returned to above pre-pandemic levels in November. That's before the Omicron variant hit. Official figures show GDP rose by 0.9%, more than 0.5% higher than predicted. The construction industry saw some of the greatest growth thanks to the dry weather. Pothole-related breakdowns have reached a 3-year high. The RAC says it received over 10,000 call-outs for problems caused by damaged road surfaces last year. That's 19% more than in 2020. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Patrick and Anaya and to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 10:37. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Iman, and Patrick Christys. We're live on your TV and your radio this morning.
Yes, indeed. Now, China deny interfering in UK politics, naturally, after an MI5 alert that a Chinese agent had infiltrated Parliament. The security service said that Christine Lee established links for the Chinese Communist Party with current and aspiring MPs.
Yes, indeed. Well, she then gave donations to politicians, including Labour MP Barry Gardiner, who received more than £420,000 from her.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, well, let's get all the details now with GB News' Home and Security Editor, the one and only Mr. Mark White. Mark, this story is potentially massive, isn't it?
Yes, it is significant. It's not spying in the traditional sense of the word, the sort of James Bond style stealing of secrets. But what it is this grey area espionage that's become really quite in vogue of late. And that is effectively, you know, we've seen it in Russia. China are involved in it as well. It's seeking to gain influence, to subvert the democratic process in this country. And as far as MI5 is concerned, this alert is unusual. It's not something that they do very often at all. So they took the decision to alert the parliamentary authorities yesterday. That information was then passed to peers and to MPs, which is why we found out about it. And this Christine Lee, they said, was involved in that activity, as you say, giving hundreds of thousands of pounds, the bulk of it going to the Labour MP, senior Labour MP Barry Gardiner, someone who was a minister in Tony Blair's government and who, of course, was, in the shadow cabinet under Jeremy Corbyn.
It's interesting because I saw Barry Gardiner, actually. I bumped into him, I think it was last Friday, and we were doing a thing about MPs' pay, and he stood next to me by the coffee machine there and said, oh, you the one who wants me to be paid less? Little did we know, eh? But there we go. So what potentially...
Didn't offer you a bunk or anything.
Didn't offer to pay me any more. That's for sure. No. But what can we expect now for Barry Gardiner? I mean, has this been looked into or what?
Well, he's spoken to a couple of outlets where he says he's very angry at the way he says he has been misled by this woman, Christine Lee. He has severed all contact with her. In fact, her son worked in his office right up until yesterday morning, until he says he was visited by the head of parliamentary security and two MI5 agents. And then he called this young man up and said that he required him to tender his resignation. So he's no longer working for Barry Gardner, although he also was quick to add that the security service says that there's no indication that this young man was linked in any way to the activities that MI5 say his mother was responsible for. But £420,000 over a number of years given to Barry Gardner that he says he didn't benefit from directly, that it paid for researchers in his office. I think the question on this that probably has not satisfactorily been answered by Barry Gardner is he says that he contacted MI5 a few years ago when she offered to give him money, to pay money to fund researchers in his office because it rang alarm bells in his head and he wanted to make sure it was okay with the security services. They apparently, according to him, said that yes, it was okay. But if he felt that it was serious enough for him to approach MI5, then you would think that perhaps it might be an indication to him that he shouldn't be accepting money from her in the first place.
And Mark, do you think that as a society we take these things seriously enough? I mean, when I think about, Chinese spies, it almost harks back to the Cold War. We sometimes say that era is over, but actually, China is on the rise economically and militarily. And is this potentially something that is going to be something that's going to get more and more?
China is, as you say, on the rise, and Russia have been at it for many years as well. It's all about buying influence and placing people in places of influence and getting people from China to make contact with individuals. You could say probably lots of countries are involved in that to an extent, but I think the concern of authorities here is that Russia and China take it a step further, and it really is disruptive and damaging to the way in which a healthy democracy works, to have agents of that country really trying to subvert the democratic process and to ensure that issues that are not conducive to what the Chinese government would like are somehow diverted, that they are influencing people away from issues of concern, like Tibet, like the Uyghur Muslims, things like that. So it's, as I say, it's this grey area espionage that is becoming more of an issue, and it's something that the security services, MI5 and MI6, the authorities in general, are having to turn more of their attention to.
Indeed. Well, it's a concern, isn't it, for everyone? It should be a concern for all of us, the notion that anything like this, anything like the allegations anyway, could be taking place in our home of democracy, I suppose. Mark, thank you very much. Mark White there, our home and security editor. He'll be joining us again later on because hopefully, anyway, at about 11 a.m, we're supposed to be going to the Commons with Priti Patel, who's going to make a statement on all of this. There's going to be lots of Spygate today, ladies and gentlemen. Mark will be, of course, with us then as well. Thank you very much, Mark.
It is interesting, though, because, I've been seeing many stories like this building up for several years now. We had when President Trump was the president arguing against us having Chinese involvement in our 5G Huawei, and there was complaints that they are having involvement in our strategic infrastructure. I know that at university there was a lot of concerns about Chinese funding of universities
big time.
And things like that. So it does seem that this issue has been discussed for a while, but politicians don't seem to be taking it seriously. Some people are arguing because maybe they financially benefit from it in different ways. I don't know.
It's a really interesting case, this. It is a really interesting case. But we're actually going to be talking about this right now, actually, continuing our discussion of it, but also a bit on Partygate as well, because, of course, we did find out that today the Downing Street parties were taking place, apparently anyway, on the evening before Prince Philip's funeral, etc. But I really do think that this Spygate story is absolutely massive. And joining us now, very gratefully, to have him on the show, Peter Edwards, the former editor of Labour List. Good to see you again, Peter. Thanks for joining us. Let's just start with this Spygate stuff, right? How much trouble is Barry Gardner in here? And by association now, how much damage could this do to the Labour Party, do you think?
Well, how much trouble is the entire Westminster establishment in would be my question. The Labour Party hasn't said very much. We know Barry Gardner and his parliamentary office took funding, so it's important people are clear that's funding for staff, not to the MP directly to pay the costs of wages. We don't know, and the Labour Party haven't said much more beyond that. We know the Chinese Communist Party, and it is bizarre, it's like something out of John le Carré, approached Labour and Tory MPs. And to me, the obvious answer seems to be that you put a cap, and probably quite a low cap, on outside funding of MPs' offices. And I've worked for an MP, and they generally have a couple of staff in Westminster and a couple of staff in a constituency, a bit more if you're in the shadow cabinet. So let's put a cap on the extra funding, because there's already plenty of taxpayer funding.
But Peter, some people have been concerned for several years that the Labour Party in particular seemed to be much more favourable towards the Chinese regime. There were concerns and discussions about that under Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, do you think it's fair to say that the left or the Labour Party are much more sympathetic to China?
Well, I do have to challenge you on that. What's your evidence that the Labour Party is sympathetic to the Chinese regime?
I mean, I think there is this suggestion just because it's I think even on This Week several years ago, Diane Abbott, she actually did say that, for example, she against, what's his name, Michael Portillo, those arguments in favour of the Chinese regime. I think that many people have had that association with the left.
I think she said something like Mao had done all right in the round or something like that, hadn't she, I think? But yes. But
Right, well, we've got to be clear what we're talking about. So first of all, the Labour Party of today is very different to the Labour Party of Jeremy Corbyn. And it's clear some people who are very close followers of Jeremy Corbyn had a lot of sympathy for South American regimes, often dictatorships. And I think that did strain into sympathy for China. I'm certainly not one of those people. I think the Labour Party is in a very different place today. And I'd make a separate brief point, which is maybe kind of technical, but quite boring. But all of the time, when you're the opposition party, you tend to get funding for all the bills that go through Parliament. And the Tories did the same. And normally that's from British pressure groups and British businesses and accountancy firms funded the Tories in opposition, and they helped out Labour go through the finance bill, which is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long. So the idea of a nation state, though, backing an MP's office of any party, I think is a lot more worrying, full stop.
There's a lot more worrying about what could have happened as well. Barry Gardiner, of course, was a senior figure in the Jeremy Corbyn shadow cabinet, shadow government there. And look, if that election had gone a different way, for example, if the one he ran against Theresa May had gone a different way, I mean, we could have had a cabinet minister here, potentially anyway, a cabinet minister here, if some of these extrapolations from the allegations, as it were, could be taken to their conclusion, who might have been feeding stuff back to the Chinese government. I mean, that's pretty big, isn't it?
That is nonsense, and I don't normally smile at your questions because you're a serious individual, but that is nonsense. I think you're straying over. There were so many ifs, buts, and presumptions in that question that I think that's where you do stray a bit into John le Carré.
A few hundred grand from someone who's essentially a Chinese spy. If you're in the cabinet, it's not a massive stretch to suggest that maybe some information
doesn't happen, though, does it? It doesn't happen.
No,
it doesn't happen. And the reason we're talking about this is because all these things are declared.
Yes, that was interesting, actually, because presumably this should have been picked up a lot sooner. It's all very well and good MI5 knocking on the door now, but I mean, these things will have been declared for a number of years, won't they?
Well, so Patrick, you'll know this. There's a register of members' interests, and in case your viewers don't follow the minutiae of all of this, a politician of any party, if they take money from an outside source for the running of their office, or they have an outside job, they have to declare that. And that normally happens in two areas. Tory backbenchers, government backbenchers, where they've got time on their hands and they tend to come from a bit of a city background. And then the opposition, where the opposition has fewer resources. And I was saying earlier, they tend to get a bit more support from pressure groups or from UK businesses for things like the finance bill, which is thousands of pages long. There's lots of acts of parliament. And obviously the reason the government, whoever's in power, doesn't do that is one, because it wouldn't be appropriate. But of course, if you're a minister rather than a shadow, you have hundreds of civil servants rather than just two IPSA researchers.
Well, anyway, moving on to Partygate. I mean, so obviously Labour are trying to make a lot of hay out of this scandal for Boris Johnson. But we do know that, for example, the Labour leader in Wales was caught, in a party effectively, last year, dancing and so on. So do you really think that, Labour has been consistent across the board when it comes to actually following all of the rules and should really be capitalising on this scandal with the Prime Minister right now?
I don't think it's Labour making hay out of it. I think it's the country being pretty appalled by what it's read about. There was a further revelation about the party the night before the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral in this morning's newspapers. And the line that struck me from this week that was briefed out was, I think it was Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Tories, seemed to have a private and fairly difficult conversation with the Prime Minister. And we were told in several papers that Boris Johnson couldn't give assurances there wouldn't be more revelations to come. And that was the thing that I think stuck in the Scottish Tory leader's mind and in my mind, that midweek we thought, is there more of this to come? There was another story about the party before the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, this morning's papers. We all know Sunday papers are incredibly resourceful in trickling out further information. So when is the rot going to stop would be my question.
Oh, indeed, and there are rumblings about some things that may or may not be about to come out in the Sunday papers as well this particular Sunday, so we'll have to wait and see. We did talk earlier, actually, about the booze culture in Westminster, and I think that possibly has something to do with it as well, doesn't it? Peter, thank you very much. As always, hope you have a cracking Friday and indeed weekend. Peter Edwards, the former editor of Labour List.
Yes.
Gosh, this Spygate issue's got some people going.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think he's right to mention that the Labour Party now is different to the one under Jeremy Corbyn. But we do know that, he praised, Cuba and many kind of South American regimes. And so there has been an association, with the left being much more sympathetic to communist regimes and communist ways of thinking. But obviously, if Keir Starmer hopefully will condemn this Chinese spying as strongly as he would.
Well, you'd hope so, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the minimum I would expect him to do.
They've been very quiet on it.
Yeah, we have been. Tracy's been in touch. Why is China paying for Labour Party staff? That is worse than a glass of wine in a garden. I think it probably is worse than a glass of wine in a garden, to be honest with you, Tracy. I can't help but agree with you on that one. People calling for Barry Gardiner to resign, a full examination of all phones, hard drives, etc., etc., etc.
Well, I think there needs to be an investigation because we spying is clearly something that someone may well be trained and have particular techniques, and we don't know yet that he was fully aware of all of the details. Now we don't know, and so I think hopefully there will be an investigation to find out the details of that.
Yeah, there will be, and I think there needs to be, because it needs to restore faith and see how far this rot goes as well, actually, throughout the Labour Party. And indeed, it may expose that Tory MPs have been nobbled as well by the Chinese, or indeed anyone else. It's important. Maybe we need to clean our democracy up, don't we? Really?
I saw a story a couple of weeks ago of Amazon, the Chinese government pressurising Amazon to remove any less than 5-star reviews from one of their leaders' books on Amazon. And so this is something that is really going on across all levels of society, so I do think it's something that we need to be looking at across the board, the way in which Chinese influence may well be affecting our democracy.
I agree, and I think they're everywhere. And there's a lot of soft power things that the Chinese are very, very good at doing. They've started twinning with towns. I know this might sound ridiculous, but it's true. They've started twinning with towns in various rural areas around the UK, and actually including one of them that's around Kendal, right, basically. And Kendal is in Cumbria, and Cumbria is very close, of course, to a couple of our nuclear power plants are, and you can't help but wonder if they want to get as much influence around those areas as they possibly can.
Well, on top of that, we still have not had really a proper investigation, open conversation about the lab leak hypothesis in relation to the origin of COVID-19. So we do know that when it comes to things with China, oftentimes they get let off the hook.
Huawei was blocked, wasn't it? But that was a massive struggle. Of course, we've seen what's been happening in Hong Kong and the way that the Chinese government reacts when we just ask them simply to stick to the rules of a treaty. It's very much, well, if you want war with China, you can have it. Well, we're not really saying that. We're saying, do you mind sticking to the rules? But just moving...
That's another thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just moving away, quickly from Spygate, just got time for another couple of views. We did a lot on Prince Andrew and the royal family at the start of the show. We'll revisit that again later. But I was asking, look, how damaging might this be for the royal family? In answer to Patrick's question, yes, I think the royal family will survive because the alternative is unthinkable. This is from Leslie. They've acted now over Andrew, had his royal connections removed, and I think Charles and William will have been instigators in that, but the Queen is no fool. And that's from Leslie. Thank you very much.
And very quickly from Pamela, he said, who the hell will replace Boris? The other contestants, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, are not up to scratch. Well, that's Pamela's view on that. Well, keep all of your thoughts coming into us. GBviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more of these top stories and plenty of discussions just after the weather and the break.
Hello, good morning. It's pretty cold out there for many of us, a frosty start with some dense fog patches to contend with during the morning and in some places into the early afternoon. Otherwise, sunny spells away from the fog, the weather staying generally dry and settled under this area of high pressure, but it's the light winds surrounding this high pressure that have led to the frost and fog overnight. And that means it's going to stay chilly for some time this morning. Temperatures only slowly rising, the fog only slowly thinning and lifting. Some fog patches lasting into the afternoon, but otherwise across a good part of England and Wales, sunny spells replace the fog. Less fog and frost for Scotland and Northern Ireland, more cloud here, some persistent damp weather for the far north and northwest, but milder for the northwest of Scotland, 10 Celsius here, whilst it's a cold afternoon further south, especially where any of that persistent fog remains. Temperatures struggling out of the low single figures where that happens. And the fog quickly reforming overnight, with eastern England signalled as being the, well, favoured spot, I should say, for some of the worst visibility by the start of the weekend. Low cloud more likely for South Wales, southwest England, perhaps frost-free here. In between, some sunshine, but certainly a cold start once again across a large part of England and Wales. Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing a bit more of a breeze and areas of cloud, so generally fog and frost-free here, but a lot of cloud and some showery rain into the northwest later, whilst England and Wales stay generally quite gloomy. Some brighter spells, but in a few spots, particularly eastern England, the mist and fog could last all day. And again, where that happens, it will feel on the chilly side. Sunday brings brighter skies to northern parts of the UK, staying generally cloudy and misty further south. Monday sees mixed conditions for many, but for most, it's looking rather dry.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it. Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick, Christys and Anaya Falarin Imam. We're on your TV and we're on your radio, and we've got a big hour coming your way very shortly. Hopefully going live to the Commons to hear Priti Patel and what she's got to say about the Chinese spying scandal, and as well, of course, much more on the Prince Andrew latest.
Yes, absolutely. Make sure that you get in touch with your views. As usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be reading that out all throughout the show. But first, as usual, here's the latest news.
Good morning. It's 11 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Australian Prime Minister has defended his government's decision to cancel Novak Djokovic's visa, saying it was in the public interest. The tennis star had previously won his court appeal against being deported. It puts further doubt over whether or not the unvaccinated world #1 will play in the Australian Open. The first Grand Slam of the year starts on Monday. The Prime Minister's former Director of Communications has apologised unreservedly for a party held to mark his leaving Downing Street. Number 10 staff have been accused of holding two parties the day before the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. Restrictions at the time banned indoor mixing between different households. Downing Street says Boris Johnson wasn't at either gathering and was away from home at the time. But Shadow Attorney General for England and Wales, Emily Thornberry, told GB News the Prime Minister should have enforced restrictions.
The rules apply to everybody equally. That's what the rule of law is about. It isn't just rules for some people and the leadership don't need to worry about it. It applies to everyone. No one is so grand, Boris Johnson, that the rules don't apply to them. And he should not have been having parties at number 10, and the staff at number 10 should not have thought that it was okay to have parties even when he wasn't there. They wouldn't have had a party if they thought that Boris Johnson didn't approve of it.
Virginia Giuffre says she's pleased a judge has ruled her civil sex abuse case against the Duke of York can go ahead. Ms Giuffre says she wants to expose the truth. Prince Andrew denies all of the allegations against him. It's after the Duke was stripped of his royal patronages and military titles. Royal commentator Dickie Arbiter says Andrew's legal team now have some difficult decisions to make.
He's had his comeuppance. He's going to have to now fight this case. He's got several options: fight the case, pay off. But paying off comes at a price, not only the value, but also an apology. An apology then is seen by many as an admission of guilt. He's in a no-win situation, and being in a no-win situation, there's no way back for him.
French authorities say a person they pulled from the water in the Channel has died. It's after a boat believed to be crossing to the UK got into difficulties. The tragedy follows the news that 271 people made the treacherous journey through freezing waters yesterday. That's more than in the whole month of January last year. The government will hold a review into how a Chinese agent was able to get so close to senior British politicians. It comes after MI5 warned the agent had been interfering in UK politics. China has denied the allegations, saying it has no need to buy influence in any foreign parliament. Security Minister Damien Hines told GB News MI5 issued the alert to put a stop to the spies' activities.
This is an example of our system working, having detected it and then using this notice to disrupt it and to warn effectively other people. So as I say, it's the system at work, and these notices are one tool that the security service has at its disposal. But what we've seen yesterday is a disruption of this activity. I'm afraid that we're likely to see more of these in the future.
A parliamentary committee has said public money should be withheld from cricket unless it can clean up its act on racism. It's after Azim Rafiq gave an emotional testimony in November last year about racism he experienced at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. Yorkshire have been widely criticised for their handling of Rafiq's allegations. 25 charities have written to the Prime Minister calling for urgent action to tackle the energy bill crisis. Charities, including Save the Children and Age UK, warn emergency funding is needed. It comes as fuel poverty looks likely to increase from 4 to 6 million households. Members of Insulate Britain have been released from prison this morning after they broke an injunction preventing them from protesting on roads. They're among 10 people who were jailed for breaking the government's injunction on the M25. Members of the activist group took part in a series of protests that staged blockades on major roads between September and November last year. The UK's economy returned to above pre-pandemic levels in November. That's before the Omicron variant hit. Official figures show GDP rose by 0.9%, more than 0.5% higher than predicted. The construction sector saw some of the greatest growth thanks to the dry weather. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as and when it happens. But for now, let's return to Patrick and Anaya and to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Flower Iman and Patrick Christys on your TV and your radio. We're going to show full of all of the big stories and big discussions that you care about, so here's what's on the menu.
Yes, well, Prince Andrew has had his honorary military roles and royal patronages taken away by the Queen, hasn't he? He will also no longer use his style of His Royal Highness in any official capacity. We'll be talking to Nigel Cawthorne on that, author of Prince Andrew, Epstein, Maxwell and the Palace. You know the guy, he's always on our show. I see him more than I see my own family, actually. But he is the best in the bit, so that's why.
And has Westminster been infiltrated by a Chinese spy? A Labour MP is accused of taking hundreds of thousands of pounds from a Chinese operative. We're live with Priti Patel in the Commons very shortly.
Yes, we are. Fingers crossed. And we have all of that coming up, much more across the programme. You can get in touch, as usual, GBViews at gbnews.uk. We're going to be having a chat soon, though, right now, in fact, to the one and only Mark White, just teeing up what we can expect from Spygate.
We're just waiting for Priti Patel to make a statement in the House of Commons shortly regarding the Chinese spy Christine Lee. In the meantime, we'll get a recap on the story. Let's now speak to Home Affairs and Security Editor Mark White for GB News. Thank you for joining us again, Mark White. Give us the latest.
Yeah, well, we're told that the Home Secretary would be making a speech from 11 o'clock, but as usual with the Commons, these things are pretty fluid. It depends on other business, but we are expecting her to start speaking any time now because there is a great deal of concern being expressed by members of Parliament and also peers in the House of Lords as well, because they were alerted yesterday by the heads of security of both the Commons and the Lords about this spy who has been operating within Parliament, trying to gain influence and, we're told, subvert the democratic process along the way. And this individual, Christine Lee, she has been named, she's a solicitor, has offices in London, offices in Hong Kong as well, we're told, and has paid some considerable amounts of money over the years as well, some £700,000 close to, that has gone to various politicians. The vast bulk of that has gone to the senior Labour MP, Barry Gardiner, to not, he says, to enrich himself, but for his office, to pay for researchers in that office. We're told by parliamentarians that it's not unusual for politicians to accept some kind of donation from various people who want to help fund researchers within their office. But they obviously have to declare that in the register of members' interest, which Barry Gardiner says he has done. He's been completely transparent throughout this process, having received close to £500,000 from this woman, Christine Lee. He says that he himself was slightly concerned. Alarm bells rang a few years ago when she offered him money to help pay for researchers. He said that he approached MI5 to check as to whether this would be in order, and that he was given the all-clear then. And only now is MI5 saying that there is something untoward in the way that this particular woman operated. And he says he's very angry, claims he's been used.
What does this say about how easy it is to get close to a politician in this country, essentially? You know, if you are that way inclined, essentially a spy, in a broad term, sorry, how easy it is to get involved with one of our politicians?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is, yes, of course it's easy to get close to and involved with our politicians because we're an open democracy. And you can make contact with a member of parliament, but there should be checks and balances along the way to ensure that anybody that has reached out to, made contact with a politician, if they are offering some kind of money or other services to a politician, then it's up to, of course, that politician, if they have any concerns at all, to make sure that any of that is registered in that register of members' interests, that if they have concerns, like Barry Gardiner says he did have, that they speak to the likes of the security services. Now, he said he did that, and that nothing was flagged up initially. But given that he had concerns at the outset, I think there are still questions to answer that don't appear to have been, I think, properly answered by this MP as to why, given that alarm bells clearly rang a few years ago when she offered this money to him, why did you then decide to go forward and accept a very considerable amount of money? £420,000 is not a drop in the ocean. It's a very significant amount of money.
Well, absolutely, and I think it seems, look, on the face of it, I'm sure Barry Gardiner would refute this, and he's well within his rights to do so, that it seems slightly fanciful, the idea that you would receive any money, even for office costs or staff costs or whatever, and the person giving you that amount of money would never ask for anything in return. I would find that strange. But anyway, Mark, thank you very much. Mark White there, who will be joining us again later, no doubt, about this very issue, probably. And we are actually now going to be joined by Phillip Ingram, who's a former senior military intelligence officer. We are still waiting for Priti Patel to take to the stand in the Commons, but she's taking her time, apparently. So, look, thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of this MI5? You know, this has been going on for a number of years. Barry Gardiner had been declaring it in his interest, apparently. And yet, here we are. Looks like several years and several £100,000 later, the Chinese government had an operative in the heart of Westminster.
Well, to say that they're an operative in the heart of Westminster is going a little too far. You know, the security services are there to protect us, and they'll want to do sort of three things in it. First of all, once a potential agent of a hostile state's been identified, they'll want to try and see what that agent is up to, see who they're connected to, look at wider networks that are there, and then potentially exploit that situation for the good of the UK. So, you know, ideally, if you've identified an agent, turn them, make them become a double agent and work for us and give us information back. So that's one of the first things that the security services want to do. The second thing is they'll be watching out for anything that crosses over the legal barrier. You know, we're a liberal democracy, we're a free society, and to get over that legal barrier to do something that's breaking the law or breaking the Official Secrets Act is quite a high bar to get over. But there'll be evidence gathering to see that. And whenever the security service recognise that they can't get over that legal barrier, they have exploited the individual as much as they possibly can and can't get any further with it, but they see them still carrying out actions that are against the interests of the UK, the interests of the state, then the next best thing to do is expose them. Which is what they've done with this particular notice.
Exactly, exactly. And sorry, just on that, I'm quite keen to get your take on how far China's tentacles extend throughout Britain, but also what this exposure will have when it comes, what impact it will have when it comes to our relations with China. This must be very embarrassing for the Chinese government.
It is sort of embarrassing for the Chinese government. They put a statement out denying any knowledge of it, but they would do that anyway. Would expect it. You know, espionage at this sort of level, using these sorts of tactics, it's the second oldest profession. It's nothing new. Everyone's doing it to everyone else. Chinese influence into this country and Chinese penetration in this country, massive. You cannot begin to imagine how far they're in to every level and every aspect of our society. The first and foremost, what is it that the Chinese are after? It's economic advantage. They're trying to leverage anything that gives them economic advantage across the world. So stealing our intellectual property, looking at how they can manipulate money markets, looking at information and intelligence that they can get to influence business deals for large Chinese companies. And Barry Gardiner was allegedly linked to decisions regarding energy. And remember, there's the Hinkley Point, the Chinese influence in the construction of the new Hinkley Point nuclear reactor and decisions around that. So they'll be penetrating as many different places as they possibly can. And there's the good old Chinese proverbs of death by 1,000 cuts. They will go for tiny little snippets of information because they've got the resources to build that out into a much bigger picture that they can then use to influence Chinese operations across the globe.
I mean, what can we do about this now? It does seem, an unstoppable rise of China. Under Donald Trump's presidency, he was wanting to be quite strong on China, and he was criticised for that, actually. I mean, do you think that in terms of foreign policy, from a security and intelligence perspective, even just a broader political perspective, we need to actually be discussing our relationship with China as something that needs to be thought about much more seriously?
There's certain countries around the world where we do need to be very cognizant of the relationships that we have, whether those be business relationships, academic relationships, political relationships, or elsewhere, and recognise that they are threat actors and they are targeting us, no matter how nice the individual is that comes across, how good the deal is. And China is at the top of the tree there alongside Russia. And we keep hearing the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, the head of MI6, the head of GCHQ calling them out, as well as the Americans. We are being targeted on a daily basis, and it's simple things. Business leaders who are going into China or go into Russia. If you go in with your phone or your computer or anything else, it will come out compromised. Everything that goes through that device whilst you're there and after you come out will be read by the intelligence services of those organizations. And that's personal details as well as business data. And people have to recognize it. It's important that we have this discussion so that people realize that this is going on. It's not something that's hiding in the background.
Yes, indeed. Philip, thank you very much for your time this morning. Phillip Ingram, who's a former senior military intelligence officer, just running you through there some of the details about not just what's going on in terms of the actual politics of it all, I suppose, but actually how the Chinese government does, and indeed does very well at influencing our policies over here and are getting involved with our society and essentially extending its tentacles into it.
Yes, and I mean, get in touch as well about what you think about all of this. Because some people, I remember, when people were raising issues of the lab leak hypothesis and when Donald Trump was saying there was the China virus, many people were accusing him of being racist. There's been discussions in America about the rise in anti-Chinese hate. And I think there are a whole range of factors why people seem quite reluctant to talk about the role of China and their influence within society. Do you think that we need to be going much stronger and harder on this, or do you think that this is all just, a manufactured worry, remembering the Cold War or something like that? So let us know what you think.
I've got a strong suspicion that this is not going away anytime soon. If you think of how close to the likes of Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, Barry Gardiner was, Emily Thornberry as well, it does make you just wonder, doesn't it, how far this goes, or otherwise, of course, there's no indication at the moment that there's anything more to this. It's just simply an observation, potentially. And we've had a fantastic email in here. Frederick, I used to wonder how Barry Gardiner was able to afford his Savile Row suits on his poverty-stricken MP salary. Now, Barry Gardiner, of course, claims that all of this went towards office costs, and that's important to note. But I also do wonder whether or not it does prove the point that it's very easy to be a staunch socialist when things are getting paid for you.
Well, in also other news, we've got a poll on the GB News Twitter page. Please do check it out. Do you think the monarchy will be around in 100 years' time? This is, of course, the discussions that we've been having. And so far, the poll is saying 54% of you are saying yes, but a very close 45.4% saying no.
Wow, I must say I'm surprised at that.
Well, what are you surprised? Did you think it would be stronger yes or stronger no?
I thought more people would think it would be around in 100 years' time, yeah.
Well, I said to you, the younger generations, it does seem to be changing, that their kind of Meghan and Harry affair seem to be part of the culture war, and everything, every issue now seems to just fall into this culture war binary.
It does, unfortunately. Well, fingers crossed anyway. After the break, we'll be talking more about Prince Andrew, of course, in relation to what we just spoke about there. Nigel Cawthorne joins us, the author of Prince Andrew, Epstein, Maxwell and the Palace, and friend of the show, I think it's fair to say. He's on it after. First out, let's have a look at your weather.
Hello again. Some parts woke up with dense fog this morning, but that will mostly be replaced by sunshine today. Some low cloud and fog will linger, and it'll be damp in the far north as this weather front clears, but the rain tending to peter out. On the broad scale, the weather is dominated by a large area of high pressure, with light winds and dry weather for the vast majority. And once most of that fog lifts, we will see some sunny spells across much of England, Wales into eastern Scotland. But a few fog patches will remain, for example, parts of the West Midlands, perhaps parts of southwest England, seeing that stubborn fog. And where that fog lingers, it will be chilly, temperatures not getting out of the low single figures. Otherwise, 6 to 8 Celsius in the south, a bit milder for the north of Scotland, even if it is rather damp here. 10 Celsius the max in the far north. Outbreaks of generally light rain and drizzle in the far north of Scotland. Some low cloud for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That will keep things frost and fog free here overnight. But fairly extensive low cloud, mist and fog will develop across large parts of England and Wales, particularly eastern England. Low cloud also affecting South Wales, central and southwest England through the night. And this low cloud, mist and fog will be slow to clear if it does clear during Saturday. Some places staying grey and gloomy through much of the day with poor visibility, especially for eastern England. Some brighter spells further north and west, but a few showers also possible for western areas and the far north. Another cold day where that fog and low cloud lingers, temperatures not rising above the low single figures. And then a lot of cloud remains into Saturday night. But one change on the way, a band of rain pushing into the far northwest as we end Saturday. That'll sweep south across the country by Sunday, clearing the skies, leading to sunnier conditions in the north during Sunday, but cloud remains further south.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Welcome back. It's 11:24. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Flaren Iman, and Patrick Christys. We're live on your TV and your radio this morning.
Yes, we are. Now, Buckingham Palace say that Prince Andrew's military titles and royal patronages have been returned to the Queen. And the woman who's accused the Duke of York of sexual abuse has praised a US judge's decision to allow her legal case to continue. So, as you all know, Prince Andrew faces a civil case in the US after Virginia Giuffre sued him, claiming he abused her in 2001.
Yes, he has consistently denied the claims, we must emphasise. Well, joining us now to discuss this is Nigel Cawthorne, author of Prince Andrew, Epstein, Maxwell and the Palace. Give us an update on your thoughts as the story has developed.
Well, it was a very terse letter of dismissal, isn't it? If you were being sacked, wouldn't you want something a little bit more fulsome? So I think what they really want is for him to go into exile. I understand he has some rather wealthy friends in Kazakhstan, maybe the place to go.
I believe Kazakhstan is lovely this time of year as well. But in fact, I believe it was a Kazakhstani who overpaid on one of Prince Andrew's houses by some £3 million. And so potentially, he does have some wealthy friends over there. As a man, what will Prince Andrew be thinking now? Because we've got to be honest with you, he's always come across, especially in the Emily Maitlis interview, as a deeply arrogant chap. That's the way that my personal interpretation of it has been. No one would have given that kind of interview with that kind of subject matter, in that kind of tone, if they weren't really very sure of themselves to their core. How will he be feeling today?
Well, there's always the problem of the second son of the monarch, isn't there? They don't really have a role, and he had all these ceremonial rules that he has been stripped of. He's still, strangely, a Chancellor of State, which means that he can step in if the Queen's indisposed. Which would be a rather intriguing prospect, and also that there's a real problem for the palace that when it comes to the summertime, because he has the Queen's Silver Jubilee Medal, the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. Will he get the Platinum Jubilee Medal as well?
OK, no, absolutely. And obviously the Queen now has got a Platinum Jubilee coming up. She is not getting any younger, it pains me to say, and she would have hoped to have been able to potentially, shuffle on and knowing that the future of the royal family is taken care of. How damaging do you think these allegations are going to be to the royal family? We're running a Twitter poll at the moment, by the way. Do you think the royal family will be around in 100 years' time? So far, I think it was 54% of people thought it would. Where are you on that?
Well, obviously this is very deeply damaging to the royal family, and there was the question also of I don't know whether I've gone into this before, that everyone assumes that Prince Charles automatically takes the throne on the death of his mother or the abdication of his mother, which isn't the case. There's a thing called the Accession Committee who have to invite the next monarch to take the throne. And they issue a proclamation that says that they're doing so with one heart, one voice and one mind, which means legally that it must be a unanimous decision by the commission. Now, there are various bigwigs on this commission, including the Lord Mayor of London, for example, but all Privy Councillors are automatically members of the Privy Council. And we know there's several prominent Republicans on the Privy Council, including one Jeremy Corbyn. If he says no, then I don't know what happens. Then, frankly, there's some sort of constitutional crisis.
Wow, actually, that's a fascinating point, I must say. I wasn't aware of that. I suppose you said you don't know what would happen. Constitutional crisis.
It comes from the Glorious Revolution in 1688, when we kicked out James II and invited the William and Mary to take the throne.
Well, it's fascinating. So we'll have to extrapolate on that another time, because there's just one more thing I'd like to ask you now before we go off and give our viewers the headlines, which is about Ghislaine Maxwell, actually. And she has, am I right in saying she's agreed to, there are some kind of 8 very prominent figures who she's agreed to name now, is that right, who potentially involved in her dealings, I suppose? Because I read a headline this morning, 8 very nervous men, apparently.
Well, I mean, that's all she's got, isn't it? I mean, she's a socialite, and you depend on your address book, your Rolodex to have influence in this world. And the only way that she's going to get out of jail, as far as I can see, is to throw some others under the bus.
Gosh, well, it'll be fascinating to see exactly who they are or if indeed she does it. But Nigel, thank you very much, as always, and I hope you have a cracking Friday and a great weekend as well. Nigel Cawthorne there, of course, fantastic author in all things Andrew related. Where do you stand on this? Do you think that the royal family will still be around in 100 years' time? That's our poll at the moment at GBNews on Twitter.
What do you think, Patrick, about that?
Yes, I think so. Because I think Charles conceivably would get us through to maybe, I don't know, look, fingers crossed, maybe 20 or 30 years, or speculation. And then William would go through as well, I would have thought. And I think that William and Kate really are the potential saviours of the royal family, in my opinion. But we don't know, do we?
Who knows when they're actually going to take the throne? I mean, the thing is that I worry about, there was a very interesting column by Peter Hitchens in the Mail on Sunday several weeks ago where he said he's a staunch monarchist, that he would find it very difficult to support Prince Charles if he continues to opine about the green agenda and how the world is coming to an end. And I do think that that sense of a kind of politically neutral monarchy that rises above the political culture wars and issues that go on seem to be dying out. The Queen has been fantastic on this, but we know that, again, Meghan and Harry, every single issue under the sun, they had an opinion on what was right on and morally superior to everybody else. And I would worry about that. I think that would do a lot of damage if Prince Charles uses his position to forward what are highly contested and divisive political issues.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think, like everything, politics seems to be getting involved in absolutely everything now, and the second it gets involved in the monarchy, it could actually be its downfall, but there we go.
Yes.
We'll be talking about, though, a little bit later on, the record number of patients now waiting for non-urgent care on the NHS. We're going to be getting stuck right into that. Is the NHS fit for purpose? Do you feel protected by it? Would you clap for it? But before that, a look at this morning's news.
It's 11:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Australian Prime Minister has defended his government's decision to revoke Novak Djokovic's visa, saying it was in the public interest. The unvaccinated tennis star previously won his court appeal against being deported. It puts further doubt over whether or not the world number one will play in the Australian Open. The first Grand Slam of the year starts on Monday. The Prime Minister's former Director of Communications has apologised unreservedly for a party held to mark his leaving Downing Street. Number 10 staff have been accused of holding two parties on the eve of the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. Downing Street says Boris Johnson wasn't at either gathering and was away from home at the time. Virginia Giuffre's welcomed a US judge's decision to allow her civil sex abuse case against the Duke of York to go ahead. Ms. Giuffre says she wants to expose the truth. Prince Andrew denies all of the allegations against him. It comes as the Duke was stripped of his royal patronages and military titles. French authorities say a person they pulled from the water in the Channel has died. It's after a boat believed to be crossing to the UK got into difficulties. The tragedy follows the news that 271 people made the treacherous journey through freezing waters yesterday. Pothole-related breakdowns have reached a 3-year high. The RAC says it received over 10,000 call-outs for problems caused by damaged road surfaces last year. That's 19% more than in 2020. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We'll be back at the top of the hour with more. See you then.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Morning all, it's 11:36 and this is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, Ananaya Falarin Iman, right here on GB News, on your TV and of course on your radio.
Now, have you lied your way to the top?
Yes.
Well, an American student is accused of faking poverty to win a place at Oxford University. 24-year-old Mackenzie Fearston described herself as growing up in foster care and being from a low-income family.
Well, it later emerged that she attended a private school and has now lost her scholarship, apparently. So we're going to be having a little bit of a chat about this because, you know, part of me thinks, hey, she's gamed the system. You know, if she feels as though doors are completely closed to her, ironically, because of her privilege, and she's desperate to go to Oxford, then she's lied about it. But the other part of me thinks that this is pretty low rent.
No, I mean, I think that, the scholarship was in place for people from a low income. We do know that we don't live in a society where there is equality of opportunity. And so that there's opportunities to remove the barriers in place for people that have good grades but have other barriers, economic, family, power and so on, that prevent them. And so she's taken that place away from somebody else that may well have deserved it. But she had a story that was made up in order to get there. But there is a perverse incentive that I do think is important to make on a lot of these identity-based schemes, because it does effectively incentivise people to play up different aspects of themselves in order to get a place. And I've seen it, you know, people lying about being ethnic minority, people lying about being, you know, from the LGBT community and so on, because they think that that might give them some kind of benefits.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah. It is a strange one, isn't it, really? Because I know a lot of people do feel as though, clearly, well, there is obviously the need for scholarships. There is obviously the need for a load of different schemes to help people who are from a disadvantaged background or, say, have a disability or have some form of hardship, whatever. Of course there is. That's a perfectly natural thing. But then I think when some people maybe feel as though their routes are blocked because they have not got some kind of, you know, I don't know, past story or something like that, then I suppose people might be inclined to start making stuff up, maybe emphasising a particular, you know, like my great-granddad was from a particular part of the world and that makes me part whatever, you know?
I mean, the thing is, you know, I was looking at actually some statistics very recently done by the Sutton Trust on actually the representation of people from private schools at elite levels of society. And for example, British judges, the majority have been to the top British judges, the majority came from a private school. And we're talking about a proportion of the population that is something like 10%. So we're looking at in law, to journalism, to politicians, to tech, the people that came from private schools are hugely overrepresented. And so I think, you know, the idea that coming from an elite background is somehow, you know, now disadvantaging you, I think we really need to question
I think there's also a lot of generalisation about private schools, OK? So, for example, the one that I went to up north was...
Did you go to a private school?
Went to a private secondary school. But it was the same, the amount of money that you would pay a year there was you wouldn't even get, like, a quarter of a term at loads of your top private schools.
But there's a reason why parents send their kids to private school. We have to acknowledge that, you know, rather than a school that was free, because they rightfully understand and recognise that it gives their kids confidence, networking, opportunities that they otherwise may not have if they go.
Well, also it's even things like a lot of the private schools just have better sports facilities, for example, as well. And I think as well there's a lot of peace of mind for parents. But the point I was going to make was, there's about 40% of lads in my year, right across the school, who were on either a full scholarship, bursary, or some form of that. It was very much not your typical kind of private school experience. And there's a lot of those private schools knocking about. So just by going to... I know it's not what you're saying, but just by going to a private school does not necessarily insinuate that you're a particular type of person, for example. However, it is undeniable the amount of people who go to your Etons and your Westminsters of this world.
I'm not knocking private schools in general. I think there's a place for diversity in the education system. I think the private school that she went to, in particular, I think it's been reported that was a particularly expensive one. But I do think that it is perhaps something that we're now opening up, where when you actually emphasise in a society a hierarchy based off of, gender and race and sexuality, that people are going to play up those characteristics in order to get ahead. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. It's just the story a bit about Miss Fearston here. This is according to the Times, is that she did actually spend a year, just less than a year, in a foster care home in 2014, aged 17. She told police that her mother had pushed her down the stairs of their $750,000 home. Her mother was arrested, denied the charges, and the charges were dropped due to a lack of evidence.
Yes, but she didn't come from a low-income family. No. Her mother was a radiologist. And it is unfortunate now. She has been exposed, and it may well harm her life chances. I mean, we're reporting this in the UK, and this is an American girl. So,
would you ever lie on a CV?
Oh no, I've never done that.
You've never done it? Have you ever cheated in an exam?
No, I haven't.
Have you not?
No. I mean, have you?
No, not at all, ever. Moving on, hospital waiting lists have hit an all-time high now, with 6 million people waiting for non-urgent care. According to data from the NHS, 1 in 10 people in England are on this long list, which is expected to get even worse.
Yes, under the NHS constitution, 92% of patients should be treated in hospital within 18 weeks of being referred by their GP, but staff shortages has made this an impossible task.
Well, joining us now is Dr. Raphael Alea, a frontline doctor and wellbeing specialist as well. Thank you very much. Welcome to the programme. I suppose the overarching question is, at this point, if 1 in 10 people are waiting for treatment in England, is the NHS fit for purpose?
It's a pleasure to be with you today. Is the NHS fit for purpose? The NHS is very adaptable, and we've seen it adapt over the past 2 years very, very well. And of course, at the start, there was a struggle. But we're moving towards a place where we know how to deal with the changes in pressure. For example, the digital transformation that the NHS is seeing has contributed to a lot of the way that the NHS has adapted, and we're going to continue to see that over the next decade or so. There is the NHS long-term plan, which is currently in place, and we're seeing that being consolidated, and we're seeing the strengths and the weaknesses, and we're seeing that become more effective. So, the digital transformation is going to be a big part of dealing with these waiting lists. For example, telemedicine and other such things.
Dr. Raphael, I mean, national insurance has increased, and that was originally meant to be for social care, but the government has now said that that's going to be going into the NHS to deal with the backlog. For a lot of people, it does seem like almost a black hole, that it's just something that needs more and more money. But actually, we are seeing some statistics that are showing that actually people aren't always getting the service that they're paying for.
It's very hard to judge the NHS on the amount of money that's being spent, because it's a publicly funded service, and there's different ways that the service can be sort of rated or evaluated. You can't really judge it in terms of how much money is being spent, to be honest. So I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think the way to look at it is satisfaction of patients and also satisfaction of the staff, because the staff really know what's happening. Are they doing what they set out to do, which is help patients and provide a good service? So I think the money side is very complex, and we can't judge it that way.
I understand that. I think when it comes to satisfaction, for example, look, clearly, if this amount of people are waiting for routine things, if this amount of people are potentially having to go private, not just for minor operations, by the way, as I know this is the subject we're talking about now, but for things like heart stents and stuff like that, and there's a lot of satisfaction there. There's also, I think, quite a lot of fear at the moment because we hear stories like this, and it does look, Dr. Raphael, like this is a bad time to get ill.
You're not wrong. It is a bad time to get ill. I think people are understanding that, you know, they need to take more ownership of their well-being and their health, and that's a good thing because taking control of your health where you can, in terms of nutrition, exercise, understanding what's wrong with you if you have a condition, and being in control of it, that has benefits for your well-being in many other indirect ways. So as we move forward further into this new decade, which started off with COVID, is people are becoming a lot more educated into how to take care of themselves, which is a good thing. But of course, as you said, it's not a good time to be ill, but it's a time for transformation, which is going to be better for the next generation. And healthcare is going through a fantastic revolution, which we're gonna benefit from.
On that same point about whether or not this is a good time, I guess, if it can ever be good to get ill. I mean, coming down the pipe is potentially a lot of doctors being sacked and essentially for not getting vaccinated. I mean, what's your position on that? Because this has been a controversial issue over the last few weeks, and we are seeing more and more doctors actually speaking out against it.
So we talk about pressure on the NHS in terms of the amount of patients that are coming forward and how ill they are and how we're not sure what's actually going to happen. So whether doctors are going to be fired or lose their job or quit, it's going to put the NHS in an even worse position. So I don't think that's feasible for many different reasons. There's reasons why these threats are in place, but I think we need to be practical, we need to be real, and people deserve to have choice. And we're going to see what happens there. But it's not going to be practical. It's not going to be safe, and a lot of doctors are going to be in very difficult positions. So it's a little bit worrying.
Do you think we'll get to a point where we actually do hear a Prime Minister stand up before us, probably flanked by, the usual medical bigwigs, as it were, where they say, look, our NHS now just fundamentally cannot deal with the demand on it. You, as people, have a responsibility for your own health now in more of a way than you did before, more of an overt way. We really are relying on you now in a big national effort to desperately do your best to eat healthier, exercise more, and as a national duty almost, try to make sure that you limit the amount that you can get ill, really.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying, to be honest. And I think that touches on another point where the public, when they understand the difficulties on the NHS and on healthcare workers, whether that be nurses or doctors or other allied healthcare professionals, when they understand the pressure, they can do what they can to make it easier for the NHS, whether that be being more patient or knowing how to triage or prioritize when they need to be seen. Because in the past, we've seen people going to the GP just essentially to talk. They're taking more ownership. On the other side, we need to be careful and also think about healthcare professionals' well-being, because often in the past we've seen the people who suffer sometimes the most are healthcare professionals, of course, also and sick patients. But healthcare professionals, they're workers and employees like everyone else, and they deserve to look after their own well-being. And it could be things like they're not getting enough sleep because they have to do overtime. They could be ill, but because no one's working on the ward, they still need to go in because they're duty to their job. So I think the public need to be very understanding, which they are. We had the Clap for Your Carers situation, which was fantastic. It allowed us to be galvanized and be happy that people can see what we're going through. But
I agree with that. I do agree with that. I do think as well, to make the point, and look, I don't know, you may well disagree with me on this, that it is a bit of a two-way street, and there was a period of time where at least the perception was anyway that some GPs weren't necessarily seeing as many people as they could, misdiagnoses, etc., etc., etc. So I think we've got some work to do as a country, I think, really, to re-amalgamate, I think, a lot of the public's attitude towards the NHS and the NHS attitude as well, potentially, towards the public, but that's just my perspective on it all anyway. But thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it, and I do take on board everything that you said there about our medical professionals' well-being. We would quite literally be stuck without them, wouldn't we? So keep up the good work anyway. Dr. Raphael, thank you very much. Dr. Raphael, hello there, frontline doctor and well-being specialist.
Yeah, you know, I disagree slightly with your question about whether, you know, politicians should be standing up or doctors should be saying, you know, actually it's time for us all to do this and that about our health. I worry about the expansion of this kind of public health bureaucracy, which tells us how to live our lives in every single way. I think there's always
banning ketchup sachets.
You know, we've got New Zealand, you know, effectively banning smoking. There's been calls to ban smoking here, and you know, sugar taxes, and you know, getting rid of adverts for fast food. It's just, you know, we are moral agents. You know, we can come to our own conclusions, weigh up what's right for ourselves. And I think that you have to get to the root causes of what causes obesity and all sorts of things. I just want a break from being lectured about.
You want a break from being lectured? I don't blame you at all. And I really do stand by that. I think it does work both ways. I think the public, look, I'll say it, at the start of this pandemic, and the NHS and doctors do wonderful, fabulous, life-saving things on, not on a daily basis, on a minute-by-minute basis, but I do think there have been times during the course of this pandemic where the public has been right to feel let down as well, actually. And it does have to work both ways. If, you know, you're there going, well, we'll do what you can now to protect the NHS, all right, OK, but it's got to do what it can to protect us as well.
Yes, well, moving on slightly, a multi-million-pound legal claim has been launched against Facebook in the UK. It seems that Facebook are going through all sorts over the last few years, but if successful, it could see more than 44 million people compensated over unfair terms and conditions imposed on its users.
Oh, interesting stuff. Well, the lawsuit accused Facebook of abusing its market dominance and seeks a minimum of £2.3 billion in damages.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is Will Guyat. He's a technology journalist. Thank you for joining us on the programme, Will. I mean, what do you make of this? Facebook seems to be having a hard time. We've had whistleblowers recently. We had the, you know, scandals over privacy and all sorts, and now this potential lawsuit.
Well, if this actually gets to court, I will eat my hat. This will not happen. This will not get to court. We will not each get 50 odd pounds each, which is what various people are suggesting. This is built on fairly interesting concept that Facebook hasn't been disclosing the value it gets from us as users for a period of time. I think they calculated it from 2015 to 2019, and that's where this 2.3 billion number came from, around about 50 quid per user. And it's based on this theory that Facebook has made untold amounts of money from us as users, our data, which they've sold and used for advertising. But Facebook is a free service. Facebook very clearly makes that in the lengthy terms and conditions, which are dull and boring. It does say we are a free service, but we use your data to make money, and that's how we keep our service running. So I can't see how this particular lawsuit will have any merit and will carry through. We've had other examples recently where people have tried to go via the EU to do similar things, and they've always fallen at the first hurdle. That's not to say, though, that people aren't happy with Facebook. It's a tough time for Meta. That's what Facebook rebranded themselves to a couple of months ago in the hope that they could move beyond some of the troubles that they're facing. They've got there's the trust issue. We've had the court cases, and there is the undeniable fact that more and more of us are getting unhappy about giving them our personal data and have concerns about their validity as an organisation.
Can we trust Facebook with our data?
I feel we can trust Facebook with our data, but the reality is you're in a situation where there is very few other places you can go if you want the kind of services that Facebook offers. If, let's say, for example, Facebook said to you, right, we'll charge you £10 a month, but we won't target you with adverts, we won't sell your personal information to people, I'm not sure how many people would take it. Most people want it for free, but are also getting increasingly concerned about the data that they use. The challenge, and one of the interesting points of this proposed court case, is the fact that they're suggesting Facebook don't tell us as users how much our information is worth. And if you go on the estimate that over 4 years it was around about 50 quid, Facebook aren't giving us £10 back every year, but arguably if Facebook was a commercial service, we would be paying a lot more for it than people think you probably would have to. You know, Facebook, if it was a commercial service launching now, you'd be paying £5-10 a month for the privilege of using it. But because it's ad funded, it's free.
Thank you, Will Guyatt, technology journalist. And we have had a statement from Meta about this. It says people access our service for free. They choose our services because we deliver value for them, and they have meaningful control over what information they share on Meta's platform and who with. We have invested heavily to create tools that allow them to do so. Well, that is the statement from Meta about this.
Do you think you'll be on the metaverse at any point?
I mean, I'm quite pro-technology. I'm very interested in some of the technological advancements that are going on in a range of areas, and if that is AI and virtual reality, I'll at least look into it. But I've seen some clips and stuff like that, and it looks quite dull. I mean, why would I want to hang out with people in a fake universe when I can actually meet people in person?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm with you on that. I don't understand it really. It's like, just seems very strange. You can go to the office together, but virtually, or live your life through an avatar. For me, it just seems to be, it'll be people bury their heads in the sand with the problems in their own real lives and just end up getting online.
Well, exactly. Well, our Twitter poll has now closed, and we asked earlier on in the programme, do you think the monarchy will be around in 100 years' time? And, drum roll...
Here we go. Go on, you can do the honours.
54.8% of you said yes, and 45.2% said no. Should we be worried? Should we be worried? Is this the end?
Is that it, really? Just 54% of you brave souls think that the monarchy will be around 100 years' time?
Well, speaking about Meta, maybe we'll become AI and we won't necessarily need a monarchy. We'll all just be in the cloud. You know, brain communication.
Right, OK, well, the weekend started early here, people, let me tell you that much. Anyway, that's it from us. I've thoroughly enjoyed presenting the show with you and I this week, I must say. Thank you very much. Don't go away, because up next we've got the briefing with the one and only Isabel Oakeshott, and I think she's about to pull a few rabbits out of her hat. Oh, yeah, do it.
3 to 4 p.m. on Sunday. Check out the discussion with me.
Hello again. Some parts woke up with dense fog this morning, but that will mostly be replaced by sunshine today. Some low cloud and fog will linger, and it'll be damp in the far north as this weather front clears, but the rain tending to peter out. On the broad scale, the weather is dominated by a large area of high pressure, with light winds and dry weather for the vast majority. And once most of that fog lifts, we will see some sunny spells across much of England, Wales into eastern Scotland. But a few fog patches will remain, for example, parts of the West Midlands, perhaps parts of southwest England, seeing that stubborn fog. And where that fog lingers, it will be chilly, temperatures not getting out of the low single figures. Otherwise, 6 to 8 Celsius in the south, a bit milder for the north of Scotland, even if it is rather damp here. 10 Celsius the max in the far north. Outbreaks of generally light rain and drizzle in the far north of Scotland. Some low cloud for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That will keep things frost and fog free here overnight. But fairly extensive low cloud, mist and fog will develop across large parts of England and Wales, particularly eastern England. Low cloud also affecting